Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys about one of the most pervasive myths out there, and that's that ketogenic diets have muscle-sparing properties. In other words, that there's something magical about a keto diet that allows you to hold on to muscle mass better or even equal to other types of diets. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Now, a lot of people when I discuss this say, why don't you link a lot of studies on this? I don't, because I'm no different than the keto guys. If I link 5 studies down below for you guys, 5 studies is barely scratching the surface. If I just cherry pick 5 little studies out of the hundreds out there, I could kind of pick ones that are biased towards what I want to say. Instead, I tell people, why don't you just go research and look at 100 different studies yourself? Because if you cared about studies, that's what you would already do. But all the people who promote studies that are keto related or reading those, you're looking at the cherry pick studies the other side has picked out. And believe me, they don't have a whole lot of them, because the research hasn't been as kind to these sort of diets as you would think it would be. When we put people in metabolic wards, we start actually doing DEXA scans to see what their body composition does. They're not kind to these diets for people who care about body composition. And people say, well, this person over here promotes it and sells it or whatever, and they're jacked and ripped and lean and everything else. How can you say that? Well, that's because they up the dose on their drugs. In other words, people need more drugs who do ketogenic diets, in my experience, to hold on to their muscle mass than people who do higher carb diets, where they can just increase their drug dose. And that's the thing. Everyone you see who's jacked and ripped after doing a ketogenic diet, they usually have something in common there. They all use some of the same drugs. And I'm not going to get into what those drugs are, but you might want to step and think that through. Is it possible that they used drugs and that they're making money promoting this diet now based on their look? Is it possible that they might have used drugs to do this? And if you think it's possible, then at that point it becomes probable. That's not good proof. So when you go look at all the research on it, they generally show that higher carb diets on a calorie per calorie basis tend to preserve muscle tissue better than high fat diets. Protein is extremely muscle sparing. Carbs are pretty muscle sparing. Fat is muscle sparing, but less than the other two. Ketones themselves only stop muscle loss, and that's what they don't tell you. They're like, oh, ketones help preserve muscle tissue and losing weight. They do. Do you know why? Because they have calories. Because you eat more calories than you would have if you didn't have all the fat in there. In other words, if you took a 1,800 calorie ketogenic diet that's 60% fat, 70% fat, that's borderline keto. That's not quite true keto. And you just took away half of the fat, you'd have less ketones there, wouldn't you? But you'd also have a lot less calories. If you ate the same amount of protein and you just took away basically 30% of the calories in your diet's now a 1,200 calorie diet. Of course that 600 extra calories helps preserve muscle tissue. Should be common sense. It's the fact that ketones have calories in them that preserves it. But on a calorie per calorie basis, they don't preserve it as well as carbs and protein do. If you'd taken that same 600 calories and replaced it with a mixture of carbs and protein, you would preserve muscle even better on the 1,800 calories. And I'm not saying active, healthy, athletic young men should ever be doing an 1,800 calorie diet, mind you. But the point that is true there. And it's because this whole deal has been made about insulin. Oh, insulin helps preserve fat tissue. Yeah, it can, but only through an indirect means, meaning insulin is your body's response to calories. In this case, carb and protein calories. So there's a hormonal response here, and yes, that can slow down fat loss, but it also slows down muscle loss. But incidentally, you don't need insulin to be present for dietary fat to slow down fat loss, because you can just burn it directly. So you don't even need the hormonal response for that to happen. So insulin gets demonized here, but here's the question I would ask you for people who exercise. Now, I'm not talking about for people who sit on their couch and maybe get off the couch to maybe go to their desk job or to take a poop and to go to the kitchen and eat. Sedentary people. We're not talking about them. We're talking about people who actually exercise. It's people who go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week. Maybe people who get up and take a 15-20 minute walk every day. Non-sedentary people. People who exercise. Do you think insulin is more anabolic to their muscle tissue or to their fat tissue? It is more anabolic to their muscle tissue. In other words, insulin preserves muscle in active people better than it preserves fat. In other words, what does that tell you? The insulinogenic response of foods, which will be relatively low when you're in a calorie deficit, by the way. People who are physically active don't get a large insulinogenic response to foods. But the little bit that you get from those foods preserves muscle tissue far better than it preserves fat tissue. And now here's a question I would ask you. If you're in a given amount of calorie deficit and the hormone profile going on in your body preserves muscle tissue better than it does fat, are you going to lose fat faster? Yeah. Yeah, you're going to lose fat faster. And generally what we have found is that on ketogenic diets, when you measure body composition changes on a calorie for calorie basis, they do not preserve muscle tissue quite as well as other types of diets, because carbohydrates and protein are both better at sparing muscle tissue than fat is. Ketogenic diets are usually successful because they control appetite well for a lot of people. That's the reason a lot of people lose weight on them. They eat less calories. But that is the entirety of why they work. The fact that they blunt appetite due to a combination of nausea, mild nausea from the ketones, combined with the fact that you're removing massive numbers of food groups and you're eating the same foods over and over, your foods get boring. The more boring your food is, the less of it you tend to eat. That's the entirety of how the diet works. On a calorie for calorie basis, it's actually the worst diet ever invented for preserving muscle mass and losing body fat when calories are equal. It's actually the worst. It has a metabolic disadvantage because of the lowest possible thermic effect, and it has the lowest possible muscle preservation calorie per calorie. In other words, you lose slightly more muscle and slightly less fat. But because a lot of people can follow it consistently, it has a big following. It's a very inefficient diet, but it works for a lot of people when no other diet does. And that's the entirety of the magic. It allows you to control your appetite, and it doesn't even do that for everyone, by the way. But your training performance will be worse, and that's the other kicker. You can't train as hard on a ketogenic diet. That is not subject to debate. That is proven. That's understood. It has less muscle preservation ability. You combine those two together, can't train as hard. Well, not training as hard, not being able to lift weights as hard or train as intensely isn't ideal for creating a calorie deficit or for stimulating your muscles so that your body holds on to them. You combine that with the hormone profile, it's actually the worst possible diet you could follow in terms of preserving muscle tissue on a cut. It really is. But for some people, it's the only diet they have found that they can work with. So they're stuck with it, and that sucks because it's really a terrible diet, but it works for a lot of people. But you need to understand that this diet is vastly inferior to almost every other type of balanced diet. It is an extreme diet. It's a dangerous diet in a lot of ways, and it doesn't work as effectively on a calorie for calorie basis. It's not that good. But for some people, they lose weight on it. But we don't need to continue to perpetuate these false myths about what it actually does in the body, because preserving muscle tissue isn't one of the things that it's particularly good at. It's actually probably the worst diet ever invented for that. Go check out all the meta-analysis on it yourself if you don't believe me. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.